So, Asha, is anybody going to be able to stop Elon Musk?
Eh, it's complicated. I'm Asha Rangappa. I teach national security law at Yale University. I'm a former FBI special agent, and I'm a legal contributor for ABC News.
And I'm Renato Mariotti. I'm a former federal prosecutor, a practicing lawyer, and a legal analyst.
And we're here to help you understand topics that can't be boiled down into a soundbite or a skit. What is even happening?
That's a great question. It's funny, Asha. We come on this podcast every week to try to make sense of things and explain things to folks. I think it's hard to keep track of what's going on, even if you're paying careful attention. I don't know if you feel this way, but that's how I feel.
100%. It's just so much going on in so many different places, and it's happening so quickly. And a few weeks ago, we covered the shock and awe executive orders, but this has gone beyond that. This is actual steps that are being taken to dismantle entire parts of our government bureaucracy as we speak, with people very confused, shut out of their computer systems, who don't know what's going on. I think there is litigation that's attempting to at least pause it and put a hold on it. But I think it's even challenging for the lawyers to keep up with it.
It is, and we had talked in the very front of the show here. We had a question about Elon Musk. It's really, I think, hard for people to understand exactly what is going on with Elon Musk, because Elon Musk wants it that way. Government is supposed to be about, we want transparency in government, and the Trump administration is get paid lip service to that. But the reality is, Musk has got unnamed young men. He doesn't seem to have women working for him. Young men going around with him on some roving band throughout our government, doing all sorts of I don't remember what you called it last time. Was it hinky things? And that has only continued and escalated.
That's right. So first, he took over the Office of Personnel Management, set up his own server, his own private server, which I'm old enough to remember when that used to be the basis of a federal investigation because of the security risks. And then he used that to blast all federal employees with this buyout offer. Then he moved to the Department of the Treasury, where he and his, goons began to try to get into the Treasury payment system. We talked about that a little bit last week, and it looks like they were actually, one of these interns or kids he's got with him was actually rewriting the code, had read write access, and was trying to rewrite the code of this very complicated. I mean, I'm not a computer programmer, but it's COBOL. I don't know what the
That's old school programming language. That's an old school hardcore programming language. But just to put a pin on this for a moment, Asha, that fact that he had read write access, in other words, the ability to make changes, was not public. And in fact, representations were made to the court regarding the access, saying that it was read only. In other words, that Musk and his team could only look at data, but that they couldn't alter it. And that turned out to be false.
Right. Actually, I think the representation was made to Congress, to members of Congress, that these folks only had read access. It was only when they got into court that they had to concede that it was read write. And I think that highlights why legal action is so important, because it does reveal that even these folks are afraid to go in and lie in a court of law, even if they are willing to do it publicly or to members of Congress. And then, of course, from Treasury, he continued his Tasmanian devil, operation to USAID. And that basically just got shut down. That
Yes,
just
which I don't think you
literally,
can just do it. I don't think you can
no.
just do that. Yeah, it's
This is a statutorily created entity, and they've just decided to shut it down and fold it into the State Department, and basically lay everybody off. There are people who are stranded around the world and told that they're being recalled and they're on admin leave. Um, in fact, today, right before we got on this podcast, they're actually taking down the signage for the agency in Washington, D.C. And it's one of these things where, again, this kind of gets to how quickly things are moving before the law can even catch up. I mean, there has been a lawsuit filed there on behalf of the Foreign Service Union, but the court hasn't actually ruled on that. And meanwhile, I think the play here is all around. If we just go through and do everything and make it kind of irreversible, then whatever a court says won't really matter anymore, or it will be moot, or it will be irreversible.
all right. I'm going to offer a slightly different take. I think that there's definitely a bull in a china shop mentality from the Trump administration and the Musk folks. And I don't think that they have a single hive mind on this. I actually think that there are some people there who are not thinking about the law. I think Musk is somebody who does not care about what the law has to say one way or the other. I think there are some people in the Trump orbit who do care and understand the law and have devious ways of accomplishing things from point A to point B. And then I also think there are a lot of folks there who just are basically along for the ride and they're a step behind. And that's why I think we're seeing what we're seeing in court. I mean, one thing that's good for democracy right now, Asha, is that there is a semblance of caring about certain of these formalities right now. And that's a good thing, because if they just said to courts, like, we don't care what you order, we're not going to follow them, that would be a very different story. And the fact that we had this lawsuit, Alliance for Retired Americans versus Scott Bessent, and there was a judge in DC who actually was asking questions and getting answers, that it creates some of that friction that you've talked about a lot in the past.
It creates some friction if they are in compliance. And there are certain things where you can externally monitor whether they're in compliance. There are certain things where if it's happening behind the scenes and it's not clear. I kind of wish that judge could have appointed a monitor. I mean,
Yeah, I hear you.
the judge has the power to do that, right?
Judges can do that, but typically, I mean, it can be problematic to have a monitor to monitor the executive branch. How do you enforce that too? It's an interesting thing. Monitors are used a lot have been used a lot recently during the Biden administration in the private context, like Company X, particularly crypto companies, by the way, your favorite types of companies. Company X is allegedly doing bad things as part of the negotiated settlement. You get a monitor.
Right.
There's a lot of criticism about it and a lot of controversy, but in the context of what would the Trump administration do about a monitor in the executive context? I don't know.
Well, it's funny because Elon Musk had a monitor. He had a babysitter for his Twitter account because he was tweeting things that were affecting Tesla's shareholders and stock price, and I guess manipulating the market. I don't remember exactly what he was doing, but which agency was it? Was it the SEC? I believe it was the SEC that actually intervened and said, you have to have a babysitter who's going to vet your tweets before they go out. And I'm not sure if that person is still there. I'm guessing not. But my point is he's, having a babysitter would not be new to him, given, his past. But in any case, I do think that it's hard for us to know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. And in many ways, a lot of this is invisible because it's a digital coup to some degree. because it's happening behind the scenes and it's involving access to data. So at the Office of Personnel Management, for example, he got access to people's personnel information. In the Department of Treasury, he now has access, even if it's read only, he has access to people's financial information, to contractors, to his own competitors and what they're being paid, and all kinds of details about those kinds of contracts. He also recently entered the headquarters of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. And I guess that has all of like our weather data, I guess. And here's what I'm concerned about is, apart from breaking our government, he's also sucking up all this data. And he has his own AI company. And so, this is his, I guess, I don't know, he's using it to train his own AI model, and kind of suck it up. It's kind of reminding me of like that Batman movie with the Riddler. Do you remember?
Yeah. All
Where
it goes into his brain, right?
yeah, where he like you would watch the TV and like it would just like suck everything and like make him very powerful. He's basically the Riddler right
It's like
now.
Batman. It's Batman Returns, I think,
This
right?
is yes, Batman Returns.
That was a good one.
So, I think one of the issues right now, if we zoom back, that we're having trouble with. So number one is the speed, right? Like the speed that he's operating in the way that he, like you're in a startup, or the way that he took over Twitter, like just fire people and go left and right. And it's not, our bureaucracy is not designed that way. The rules that we have around it are not designed that way. The court system is not designed that way to handle that kind of activity. But also, it's not really clear what his position is, right? If you're dealing with the president, then you have like certain structures in place, and or a cabinet member or whoever. We have ways of dealing with them. I don't even know what this guy's status is.
Well, he's some sort of special designee of the president. And that's what I'll just say. I'm going to be, if you permit me to be sad panda for a minute. This is a situation that's being created. It's like the perfect storm for being able to create a lot of problems with no accountability for anybody, because Musk is going around like a bull in a china shop. He is designated by the president. He's been hired in some special status. The president has said all these things. Trump said all these things publicly about his status and how great he is. So if he ever does anything wrong or creates any problem criminally, he's got to get out of jail free card, because he's going to say this: I'm immune. I'm acting at the orders of the president. It's going to be very hard to prove beyond reasonable doubt Trump didn't tell him to do whatever he says he's going to do, or he's doing. And from a civil perspective, I think it's going to be hard I think he's going to break all sorts of civil laws. In other words, all sorts of laws about how our government's supposed to work. I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but I think the reality is the courts are going to be able they'll play catch up. Maybe they'll be able to restrain certain of his activities. They're going to be able to expose his activities, but it's going to be up to the public to be outraged. It's going to be up to the public to do something about this. I don't really believe that our criminal justice system or our civil courts are actually up to the task of stopping the president and his roving Doge band, or whatever they are, from doing whatever they're going to do.
Yeah. I really wish that, I'm just going to pause. This is sort of not at the top of the priority list, but I wish that people would stop calling it Doge, because that's just free advertising for his meme coin. He's actually, technically, he's whatever he is, a special employee or special appointee of the United States Digital Service, which is an agency that already exists. And that was created by President Obama to basically, I'm not even sure what it's supposed to do. I think it was supposed to kind of help modernize our agencies, or, bring all, technology and et cetera into these bureaucracies, and to help them work better. He's kind of repurposed it to call it Doge. And it just annoys me. It annoys me that this is going to be a money-making scheme for him one way or another. But the more important issue is, yes, I agree with you that our court system isn't designed, but I do think that this, the fact that no one can really tell you what he is, right? Because if he's like it's sort of like Schrodinger's bureaucrat, you know what I mean? Like, he is a private person, and then he's not a private person, kind of shifting depending on which way it would benefit him the most, or benefit the administration to characterize him. And it is, in my opinion, basically extra constitutional. Like, this is someone who is operating outside of the framework that our federal government is kind of designed for.
It's interesting, Asha. It really comes down to what you think the Constitution is. And, we'll talk more in the second segment about Pam Bondi's proclamations about the Constitution and what they mean. But one of the things she alludes to, of course, is the unitary executive and Donald Trump being the entire executive branch. And so with that vision, which we discussed in the past on prior episodes, that vision of what the Constitution has empowered the president to do, Trump can do whatever he wants. And I think that will ultimately get tested, and it'll be up to the Supreme Court to decide. But I think we both have suspicions about which way they're going to go on that.
Well, I don't think the unitary executive really gets him off here, because even if this is, I am the president, I can appoint whoever I want. If Elon Musk is a principal officer, then he is subject to advice and consent of the Senate. Like, he would need to be Senate confirmed. Like, that's the whole check there. Yeah, like, the reason that the president, even under unitary executive theory, can do whatever he wants is because the officers that he appoints get vetted, quote unquote, by the
right. I was say, like Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth, sure,
by
thoroughly vetted
by the Senate, and then also are technically subject to impeachment, quote unquote, if they are not behaving. In other words, he has to still operate. And what he's done is, I know that talking with the people who understand the arcana of like all of these court cases that go in there, they're not even able to determine. They're like, well, I don't know. Is he a principal officer? Is he an inferior officer? Like, we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, because right now he's just operating extra constitutionally, and whatever check that there could be, which would be Congress, I think would be the more appropriate branch than the courts right now. At least the Republicans have completely abdicated their role.
Yeah, I like that you use the word arcana, so kudos for that. But I don't see Congress doing anything. So it's almost like, to me, it's an academic exercise, right? I mean, that's why I think he's a perfect choice for Trump here. In other words, no one has to come on the record and say something. Yes, technically speaking, the Senate could make a big issue of the fact that, like, why isn't Musk Senate confirmed? But they're not, and they're not going to, right? There may be individual senators who might. There's a lot of people who are complaining about a lot of things, but
I mean, my senator is Chris Murphy is
sure,
like literally one of the few people who are screaming from the rooftops. So,
I mean, it's not like
shout out to him.
Okay, shout out. I mean, we got a lot of great people here in Illinois who are also. It's not like JB Pritzker and our senators.
Yeah, your governor is stepping up to the plate for sure.
Right, we got sued, and that's not even going to make it this episode. There's so much going on. The state of Illinois and the city of Chicago getting sued for sanctuary city supposed violations. It doesn't even make the cut for today's episode. But my point being is just that's why Musk is in many ways for Trump a perfect tool to use here. Musk doesn't care about what his title is. I mean, other than just having a lulz sort of title. Okay. He doesn't really need to be the secretary of whatever. He has no self-importance and doesn't really care about any of the niceties.
He has no self-importance. Is that what you just said?
He doesn't care about the self-importance of the title.
Not of the title. Yeah.
Not of the title.
He's very self-important.
Perhaps, but in a different way than like a Marco Rubio. My point is, Marco Rubio cares about what people think of him. he wants to be the Secretary of State and
Marco
have
Rubio is a dweeb. I'm saying that on the record on this podcast. He is a
okay.
dweeb.
I'm not giving you as much credit as I am for the Arcana reference, but anyway, my point being with Musk is just like, yeah, you can call me whatever you want. I'm going to go around and get shit done and do things and whatever. I'm your fixer or whatever. He's like the wolf, or whatever from Pulp Fiction. But the point being that he's doing whatever Trump wants. Trump eventually is the one who can stop him because Trump, if he ever wants to, can dispose of Musk. You don't think that's going to happen. I know from the last episode, but the point being that until 2027, where we have a new Congress, new House sworn in potentially, I don't see a check on Musk other than these courts, who for now at least the administration is listening to and trying to talk to and reason with.
Well, I think what people should consider is the very nature of our government is being transformed. And what I see as someone who teaches about Russia is I see this starting to look very similar to that. So in Russia, you have what's called the power vertical, which is you have this guy at the top and all of the agencies, there's nothing independent of him, are all kind of working to preserve this power at the top. But importantly, there are also non-government actors, oligarchs, who are operating big industries, the media, the gas industry, whatever. And they are also doing that in service. They are they understand that part of their job is to promote the power at the top in order for them to continue reaping the profits of what of their things. And that's where I see this going. I mean, we'll talk in the next segment about DOJ, but DOJ is getting sucked into that power vertical. There's no longer any independence there. These agencies that they all were in the executive branch, but were managed by bureaucrats. Like that's being purged so that they're all basically headed by Trump cronies with very little staff. I don't even know what functions they're going to do. And then you have these like non-state actors like Elon Musk, who are operating as quasi-government people, but basically using their wealth and power and authority to further the aims of the person at the top, and presumably they're going to reap some benefits from this themselves later. It's very scary because it is like what we're watching is really a transformation of our government. It's an entirely different kind of government than the one that our framers intended. And the power vertical, by the way, Congress is also now a part of that power vertical.
So I don't disagree with you, Asha, that what Trump is trying to do is change our system of government and bend it to his will. And we've talked on prior episodes about some of the recent examples of autocracy. And Russia's one. Hungary's one that also kind of fits that. But, Poland's a counterexample of a country that managed to snap back from an autocratic direction. What I just think is important for our listeners and viewers to understand is that this is not like, okay, well, we're now in a junta state, time to give up, right? In other words, we're going to start, praying to St. Trump or whatever. The reality is that there are there are democratic institutions that he's trying to subvert. There's still an opportunity to change things and get it into a different track. And that's why these lawsuits matter, because even if they ultimately don't stop whatever they're trying to do, exposing what is happening is important. Forcing the Trump and his lackeys to say what's going on, what they're doing, matters. Having the public engaged and opposing certain steps that he's taking is important, and ultimately getting out and voting is going to be very important. So I don't think that the future of the United States is written in stone yet, and people should not assume that the battle is lost, because I think there's a lot of people who are already looking to give up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't mean to say that it's a fait accompli. I'm just trying to underscore that this is highly, highly dysfunctional. Like even more dysfunctional than, normal government dysfunction. Like this is crazy dysfunction. So people do need to use every mechanism at their disposal, including protest, writing to their representatives and senators to object to what's going on. Because I think, in addition to the courts, it does look like a part of what the Trump admin is, uh, you know, just like they are sensitive to public reaction to some degree. It seems like they've started to back down when once there was like mass protest outside of the Treasury building, for example.
Right. And that's exactly my point, which is that public opinion matters. Currently, the courts matter. They may not matter as much as you'd like them to matter. Okay. It's not like we're at the end of a TV show and at the end, the judges kind of pronounce something and everything's all better. But there are institutions out there that matter. Public opinion matters. The courts matter.
Your
Voting
state
still.
AG, your
Yeah, state
AG.
AG matters. I mean, a
Mhm.
lot more is going to be done at the state level. I mean, in my state, I alluded to the fact that every public official who matters in my state got sued the other day. Okay, the governor and the mayors of the city of Chicago and the sheriff and all these other people got sued by the DOJ for laws that are both the state and the city level here that they disagree with, and they're fighting back. So my point is just that, ultimately this is not like, oh, we press a button and America changes. America is what ultimately we fight for and we determine as a people that it will be.
I agree.
So Asha, speaking about what it will be, boy, the Justice Department and FBI, which is technically part of the Justice Department, is going through a lot of changes right now.
Yeah. Where do we even start?
Well, I think I'll just kind of summarize at a high level a few things that are happening that are interesting, and we can decide what we want to talk about first. One thing that has happened is Trump has already installed some interim U.S. attorneys in U.S. attorneys' offices, most notably Ed Martin in the District of Columbia, who is investigating his own prosecutors for January 6th investigations. He's investigating the investigators and is writing like love letters to Elon Musk saying, I'm going to investigate anybody who, you find that's wrong. I'm here for you, Elon. You have mass information gathering by the acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, who's Trump's personal lawyer, who was essentially gathering information on every FBI agent, which is almost half of the FBI agents, who had worked on a January 6th investigation of one sort or another, as a prelude to a mass firing. And essentially there was a threat that they were going to publicly disseminate these names, which of course would potentially subject those agents to reprisals from people who had been prosecuted and have since been pardoned or had their sentences commuted. And then we have a new attorney general, and she issued a variety of memos, 14 memos, I think, on her first day alone, if I recall correctly, setting forth new policies for the Justice Department in line with Trump executive orders.
So let's go down the list then. So let's start with this interim DC U.S. attorney who I don't even know where to begin with kind of the craziness here. So let's just start with the fact that he he went to dismiss a January 6th prosecution for a defendant for whom he was the counsel of record as defense counsel.
Yeah, that was something, right? It's like conflict of interest.
So you're not allowed to do that for those who are listening. Like when you represent a client, in this case, either the January 6th defendant or the people of the United States, you are 100% representing the interests of that client. So you can't actually be representing both sides at the same time.
That's right. I mean, it's crazy, but that may not, of all the things that have happened, that's not the craziest stuff he's done. That's not the craziest thing he's done.
It's not the craziest thing he's done. But again, going back to what we said earlier about using every mechanism at your disposal, there are legal mechanisms like courts, but there are also things like, bar committees. I mean, lawyers have certain legal obligations, and there has been a complaint filed against him for this, asking the DC bar, I think it's the DC bar, to launch an investigation into his violation. I don't, you're smirking, Renato, but I think that matters. I mean,
it does matter. It matters in the same way that the court stuff matters because it brings things out to the public. But it's just funny because he's not going to care. He's also barred in Missouri, and he can technically represent the United States in DC, even though he's not barred in DC.
Well, fine. Then then there needs to be a complaint against him to the Missouri bar too.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's just this guy, you say I'm smirking. This guy is just like a total clown.
He's a clown. He's a complete buffoon. Like his letters to he sends, as you said, these love letters to Elon Musk, and they say sent via X. And so he sends them, and then Musk, I'm not on Twitter anymore, but he posts them and says confirming receipt. And so he's like publishing the letter, and it's got like these like handwritten pieces in there, but it's so that's the clownish, buffoonish part. The alarming part is the substance, where he is basically, he's more or less saying that the DC U.S. Attorney's Office will act as the private security detail for Musk.
Right. He's basically just like it. Well, it's hilarious in a number of respects. There's typos in these letters. He talks about his practice of how he does things as a prosecutor. And this guy has been a prosecutor for a week, or whatever it is, 2 weeks. I mean, the whole thing is just sort of bizarre. But yes, it is. It's him suggesting like, hey, Elon, anyone you find, we're going to come after them. Yeah, it is completely improper in so many different levels, and clownish. It is beneath the standards of the United States Department of Justice.
It's not how federal prosecutors behave. And I think we have seen, sometimes much to our frustration over the last 8 years, basically, that the Justice Department speaks through its filings, and otherwise they keep their mouth shut. So if there was somebody that needed to be investigated, they would quietly go do that. And then if it got to a point where they are going to charge that person or take any kind of overt investigative steps, we would learn about it. But what he's trying to do, and I think this is why I don't think it's just clownish and buffoonish. I think there is an attempt to intimidate the public in that letter. His last one said that that he would, I have to read it because it's just so crazy. Okay, let's see. He's saying if people are discovered to have broken the law or even acted simply unethically, we will investigate them and we will chase them to the end of the earth to hold them accountable. So I don't know about you. When you were at AUSA, did you go after people for ethical lapses?
No, it is against DOJ policy to investigate people unless you have a good reason to believe they committed a federal crime.
Correct. And it's
right.
And in terms of investigations, it's very rich that these people who, cried foul about, the Russia investigation not being properly predicated. Predication is laid out in the Attorney General guidelines precisely for this reason, that to open an investigation, you either have to have information or an allegation or articulable facts that there is a violation of federal law, like there is an actual statute that someone is not in compliance with, or that they present a national security threat. So, I mean, I think that what he's saying is just alarming in that this sounds like exactly the kind of weaponization that they have been screaming about for the last 4 years.
Sure. I mean, it sort of goes beyond that. I mean, it's just it's far greater than even some of the things that they're complaining of, even if what they said was true. I guess one thing I will say is, for the last X number of years, Asha, when people on our side of the aisle have really praised prosecutors and have almost lionized prosecutors, one thing I've always tried to talk about is like the limits that we have to, like, we should not put prosecutors on a pedestal, and we have to be concerned and limit their power. And it's because of stuff like this. Like, you can have great prosecutors are all well intentioned, but I actually would prefer to have prosecutors, and I like my prosecutors who feel very constrained and are very careful and very thoughtful. And the reason why is because if you have prosecutors who just feel unleashed to do whatever, you can end up with a guy like this who is a complete menace. And by the way, we talked in our last segment about Elon Musk. Here's the guy who would investigate any criminal violation of Elon Musk. This guy. So it's just, and by the way, we haven't even talked about yet the fact that he wants to, there's a hiring freeze. He can't hire anyone new at the U.S. Attorney's Office, but he wants to investigate everyone already working there for prosecuting the cases they've been prosecuting for the last X number of years.
And he wants to prosecute people who are even simply acting unethically while he's a walking ethical violation. Like, he's a walking legal ethics violation.
Yeah. But I mean, like, even from just an organizational perspective, like, hey, I'm the new head of this company or this organization or this office. I'm going to investigate all of you. Like, I think you're all committing crimes. I mean, like, how does that even happen? Right. Could you imagine that? Like, hey, I'm proud to be CEO of this company. We're going after all of you. I mean,
and these
bizarre.
are the people, who've been complaining about the rampant crime, but I guess our resources are now going to be used, to investigate AUSAs, not actual crimes. I mean, and that's actually a big problem, I think. And it kind of gets to our third topic, which is these memos that the Attorney General about where the Justice Department is choosing to put its focus and its resources. So not for nothing, Renato, but we have major, counterintelligence threats from hostile foreign adversaries, and we can get to that in a second, and what Bondi is doing on that front. We have terrorism threats, we have cyber threats, we have criminal threats. But why don't you let our listeners know where Pam Bondi is going to be investigating people?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a great segue, because we now have the Attorney General of the United States issuing a bunch of memos directing that there's a weaponization group that will be investigating Jack Smith and the other prosecutors who are involved in that investigation, investigating Alvin Bragg and Letitia James, who, for the fact that they investigated Trump. Okay. I don't even know what the crime would be there. Federal crime, that's a real hard one to understand. Their state and local officials doing their state and local duties. And then she's got basically redirecting law enforcement priorities away from things like, for example, she shutters the part of the Justice Department that would be focused on foreign corrupt practices and things like that, and instead redirects all that towards illegal immigration, most of which, like I said, I've said in prior episodes, is a misdemeanor. Investigating Hamas's attack on Israel. I don't know what that has to do with anything that happened within the four corners of the United States that I know of. And by the way, they're also really focused on DEI, and having more death penalty cases, and going after sanctuary cities. I forgot that too.
On the DEI front, they want to investigate and prosecute private companies who have DEI policies as civil rights violations. So private companies, uh, universities, state and bar associations. I don't even know. I mean, that was really a state bar and medical associations. That was really weird to me. But yeah, I do think that it's important to asterisk the piece where she is standing down the section of DOJ that actually investigates and prosecutes violations of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which is something that was set up actually, I think late into the Trump administration because of the amount of foreign influence that was that investigators were seeing. So this is kind of getting to the counterintelligence threat there. She stood that down. As you said, she is, I guess, not going to be prosecuting violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is about bribing foreign officials. And I was just reading, by the way, that Trump is also, I don't know if this is in DOJ, but he is getting rid of cyber workers who combat disinformation. So basically, we're open for business for, I mean, the constituencies that are being served here are not the American people. The other thing Bondi is doing, by the way, is also the forfeiture piece for, the like Russian yachts and stuff that we've been seizing. She's not doing that anymore either.
Interesting. I will say that, a couple things as well. I mean, first of all, there are also, so you've got for law enforcement, being a prosecutor is a lot about discretion. They're broad discretion. I mean, I think after all of this, if we ever get to a point where we are re-examining this, which we should have done after the first Trump administration and never did, we really have to think about constraining the broad discretion prosecutors have. But part of what's going on here is basically saying, I'm going to prosecute X crimes and not Y crimes, which prosecutors do all the time.
Right.
But instead of saying, I'm not going to prosecute weed cases, it's like, hey, I'm not going to prosecute foreign bribery or things along those lines. But beyond that, she's also saying, I'm going to devote all these resources to just these very narrow goals, which are unusual federal law enforcement goals. Okay. Like what Hamas is doing on literally the other side of the world. But I'm going to do it with fewer people because we're not going to let anybody who is set to join the Justice Department join. Anybody who's on a temporary status is probably not going to be allowed to stay here permanently. We're not going to be hiring. We're trying to do more with less. And instead of focusing on like violent crime and child exploitation, all sorts of very serious crimes, we're going to be focusing on DEI policies.
Company DEI policies.
Yeah, and going after cities that are not focused enough on immigration or whatever.
She's also put out a memo that won't allow assistant U.S. attorneys not to sign their name to something.
Well, basically saying that's you're immediately, that'll be grounds for termination. And be grounds for. So one thing that they kind of came up against here, and we talked a little bit about this last episode because we haven't really gotten to the lawsuits yet. Because I did mention in the last episode, I thought there would be lawsuits, and lo and behold, there have been some lawsuits. And one of them did obtain an agreement with the DOJ that the FBI agents' names aren't going to be released, which is great. But one of the things that they did that was stupid on the Trump administration's part was they didn't really have a reason to fire people, these mass firings. And basically what she's doing here is laying a groundwork where if you don't agree with the policies of Trump, and I alluded to this in our last segment, she equates the United States and its interest with Trump's interest. And that's so different than the way the U.S. Attorney General usually thinks of. I represent the United States of America and its people. I have a broader set of interests than any president or presidential administration. She says, no, the president is the executive branch. You must follow the president's policies. And if you protest them, I'm not going to allow you to get reassigned from a case. I'm not going to allow you to leave your name off the brief. That's going to be grounds for discipline up to termination.
Yeah.
It's a way of weeding out people who might dissent. And it's definitely a very dark time for our Justice Department.
Yeah, I feel really bad for the folks that are there. Do you have a sense that it has percolated to all of the different, um, divisions across the country, or is this mainly right now being felt in main justice in DC?
There are a lot of very concerned US AUSAs all across the country. And people who I'm opposing in cases even, but also people I know who are very concerned. They're dealing with a lot of changes. They all have to be in the office every day. They are dealing with all of this stuff, and they also don't know how much longer they'll have their jobs.
Yeah. One of the things that Bondi said is that she expects all attorneys to submit, proposals on how to pursue, these goals. Like, for example, to go after, say, it's like she wants to go after companies for DEI, but you need a legal theory. Like, you need to show, yeah, like she wants to go after them criminally, which is kind of crazy. So you need to find some way that they are actually, you know, are there criminal like discrimination laws and they like I don't even know. But she's basically saying you guys are smart and I expect you to come up with proposals on how to do this. So as we've discussed before, Bondi does not appear to me. I mean, I'm only really judging her on her impeachment performance, but she doesn't seem like the brightest bulb in the box. So she really does need the brain power of the AUSAs that work under her to come up with these legal theories. And I think this is a really great opportunity for attorneys that work there to really gum up the works because she seems like she could be susceptible for like, you know, a a theory that sounds smart, like, you know, how like things that sound smart, like dumb people will like feel like they're very sophisticated. I don't know. Like I just feel like they can, maybe stall and waste some time and kind of throw things into the mix to that they know is not going to ever fly in court.
Well, she's certainly trying to identify who those people may be and come up with reasons for their termination. That's for sure.
I think they can outwit her.
So, Asha, before we go, you were starting to tease me a little bit because of course I'm eating my protein bar while we're doing the segment. I actually like these are special ones that I have to get because they have like really good macros. So this is what is this? How many? This is 13 grams of carbs and 28 grams of protein. That's very good. That's
I
very
am
good.
trying to significantly increase my protein intake
Well,
by about like I need to get like at least 30 more grams of I'm a vegetarian, so it's already like hard for me.
that's tough. That's tough. There are great vegan protein bars. That's a way of doing it. I really think the way to do it, my wife eats very little meat, is protein shakes because you
I
can
do
get,
I'm doing the shakes. I feel like if I do a shake with soy milk, I
yep.
can get like close to 30 grams right there. And then I'm eating eggs like a maniac.
Yeah. If you're not vegan, eggs are really good way. Eggs are a superfood. So that makes a lot of
Eggs,
sense.
cottage cheese, um, edamame, uh, you know.
You know what else eats cottage cheese is little Henry, my dog, by the way.
Oh, really?
He cannot process regular protein because he has a liver issue. So we have cottage cheese all the time here. But in all seriousness, that's a great way of getting protein. I will as you get older, like one thing I'm sure you and I have both talked a little bit about us aging a little bit with our eyesight and other things. Maintaining muscle mass is
Yeah.
so hard to do as you get older. I work out with a trainer 4 times a week, and I really try to move as much of my diet from carbs to protein because I tend to gain weight with carbs anyway. That's what that does me in.
Yeah. Well, I have definitely, I mean, I think for women especially the loss of muscle mass is really rapid. I mean, it's kind of, alarming. So, I'm trying to add an additional strength workout every week, which never makes me feel like I like the cardio, but yeah, got to do more strength.
My doctor
Yeah.
said, whatever your age is, that should be the percentage of your exercise that's strength training. So if you're 50, it's
Huh.
50%.
Okay. All right. I'm doing that.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. All right, send your protein tips.